For the people that are listening, who is Warren?
I remember my mom passed away and I decided, I was like having a crisis. I want to move to New York with like no experience, and I just remember being like, make this work or figure this out.
Warren Carlyle, the self-proclaimed Octopus guy and the mastermind behind OctoNation, the world's largest octopus fan club. He's an expert in community building who turned his childhood obsession with sea creatures into a global movement. Warren helps brands and creators find clarity, build fanatical audiences, and stop getting stuck in hypothetical hell so they can actually make an impact.
Is there an award-winning formula?
I developed like this methodology called the 7 C's of building a fanatical online community. Not just a community that like vanity metrics, but a community that shows up and where you create programming that's actually deserving of their attention.
What comes after clarity?
Core values.
After collaborations, what's the next thing?
Connection. And then you get into conversion. Conversion is where you talk about money.
Every superhero has a flaw. Warren's flaw.
Patience that I have when I see somebody where I'm just like, you don't need a business coach, you need...
Thanks so much for coming. We're live. Let's rock.
We are? Nice.
Yeah, we're good to go, man. The man behind the many brands. Man, you have such a cool story. I got to share this with so many people, not just how we met, but also like who you are and what you've done. You know, you've done so much. You really have. And there's so many things that you haven't put your name on because it's more about the thing that you have pride in building versus it's being about you. And you've done things in your own life that have been very impressive. But for the people that are listening that don't know who Warren is, right? You know, they may, the OctoNation guy, the Octopus guy, but who is Warren?
So Warren, let's see, grew up 7 brothers and sisters.
That's great.
The middle child. And from a very early age, I just remember kind of like packaging my brothers and sisters when it came to their like introducing them to people, or I was always the one where it was like, it was never about me. It was always about, you know, my brothers and sisters growing up, or introducing them to people and figuring out what they had in common. And that kind of carried with me. I always viewed all of my friends as celebrities. And I always felt like I always saw the best version of people and where they could go, like their fullest potential. And even, you know, through my first job and things like that, I acted as I was almost like the CEO of the company, even if I was like an associate. And that's just kind of followed me through everything. I remember, unfortunately, you know, when I was like around 22, my mom passed away, and I decided, I was like, you know, having a crisis. And so I remember going to Barnes & Noble and like walking around the aisles and figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. I was like, I don't want to live in San Antonio. And so I remember thinking, I was like, I want to move to New York. And I was like, but how would I do that? And what would I do? And so I remember walking down the aisles of Barnes & Noble, and I ended up like in the magazine section. And there were all of these like fashion magazines, and I started flipping through them. And in my mind, I don't know why this like happened, but I was like, oh, I could intern for like a photographer. And so I started going through the magazines and finding photographers' names, then going on Instagram and finding out if they had an account or not, and then reaching out to them and saying, hey, here's what I could do for you behind the scenes. I could make sure that you're building your brand alongside the talent. I could make sure that you're getting BTS photos. I could make sure that you're... And so I just pitched myself, you know, to all these people. And within a week, I had landed a couple internships and ended up moving to New York, and with like no experience in fashion whatsoever. And I just remember being like make this work or figure this out. And so that's just kind of who I've always been, is like a figure it out sort of person. My interests are always very niche, and like I'm always just like, what exactly do I want? And then I figure out exactly how to do that. And I found that that's what I'm also good at with people that I meet or I encounter. Even if I'm in an Uber ride, I can have a conversation with somebody and then open up a world or open up a possibility that they didn't know was possible for them. But then not only feel like, wouldn't this be great, but this is exactly how you do it. And that has allowed me to be able to kind of hitch my trailer to certain individuals and people and just help them, you know, build their brands and do everything behind the scenes, you know.
You've really been aligned with the people that you work with
Hmm.
or the brands that you help out. You're very conscious around, wait a second, is this about making money and this is a transaction, or is this about making somebody feel confident about the legacy that they're leaving?
Yeah.
And some of the brands at which you worked with, one kind of this project that I think is so unique about something that you have a passion about,
Hmm.
which is Octopus. But I think what's really cool is like some of the people that you work with too, is like you have kind of pressure tested the integrity of those people and you've seen them live and operate, and you know that it's not about the money right now, it's more about what are they leaving,
Hmm.
and then you help them get focused and dialed in on it. Were you always that way, or did you get burned, or did you see enough to be like, I don't want to be helping people that are not the right people?
Yeah, I remember when I was in New York, I could see the writing on the wall that as decentralization was happening, meaning like we all used to watch TV and we used to watch Channel 34, MTV or channel, whatever. I knew that as things were being decentralized, that people were only in positions of power as a result of the control over media. And without that control, what you started seeing was the rise of influencers, the rise of people that could build brands regardless of who they had relationships with. And I remember at that time being like, okay, why don't I try to do that for myself or what? But I don't think I had enough confidence to do it specifically for me. And so that's when I've always been obsessed with the octopus ever since I was 7 years old.
Uh,
Yeah.
That's
So
cool.
I remember being in an aquarium and seeing an octopus for the first time, and it would follow me around. And very similar for like those of listening, if you've like ever had a dog or a cat, you can kind of when it's hungry, when it needs to go outside. Um, and when I was looking at the octopus, I had that same sort of emotion where I was just like, oh, wow, there's something going on in there. And it just stuck with me. And so I remember going to the library and looking for books about the octopus. And I was like, whoa, this is a really underrated animal. Or I guess I need to go to a bigger library because there's no octopus books. And so the more and more I dove into kind of like the world of the octopus, the more I was like, oh, wow, like there isn't that much information about them. There isn't like as much, like if you think of birds or if you think of even dinosaurs, I was like, why is that this animal that's been on this planet for hundreds of millions of years doesn't have fanfare? And, fast forward to me being working in New York and figuring out that fashion and branding is kind of like the reverse engineering the relevance of cloth, like for clothes. And depending on like this shirt could be 600 or it could be 60 or it could be 6. But depending on the brand, who they associate the brand with, what socioeconomic class they're trying to appeal to, who they strategically collaborate with to appeal to a certain demographic, it's all, to me, it's kind of like all made up. And so I was just like, well, if it's all made up, then I could do this with the octopus. And so I was like, okay, let me see. And so I created OctoNation. Well, first I told my, brother, I was just like, I think I have this idea. And he was just like, you're going to all these like celebrity events and you're around Victoria's Secret models and you're going to all this. He's like, why would you like want to leave New York or do anything other than what you're doing now? Um, and he's like, I don't think you should do it. He's like, I think you'd be the only one in the fan club if you started it.
But isn't that okay?
Yeah.
Because it's something that you were
Yeah.
obsessed with anyways.
So
I ended up being one of the, early fans. I'm proud of myself, but
so
wouldn't that have been okay too?
yeah, but I started it because I remember being 2 a.m. and just being like, no, I'm gonna start this and thinking of, I mean, it was like as soon as I started, it was very electric for me because my brain immediately went into strategy mode from the standpoint of very similar to like how I landed that internship. I immediately like started mapping out, okay, what would I need to do in order to make this the world's largest, octopus fan club? You know, what programming would I need? Who would I need to strategically collaborate with? How could I be deserving of the attention from these people who self-identify as being interested in this animal? And I just started mapping out all these programs. I started strategically collaborating. I reached out immediately to one of my biggest idols and now my mentor, Cy Montgomery. And I said, hey, I haven't seen anything online about fan clubs or anything like that. I think we should start one together. And she was just like, I have no desire to, She's like, I love being in nature. She's like, I'm a naturalist. She goes, but go forth and conquer, Octo King. And I felt like that was kind of like her way of saying I support you, and that was really all of the validation I needed from someone like Cy Montgomery telling me that I could do this. And so I started it, and just remember taking a journalistic approach to my favorite animal and writing. I would find underwater photography and I'd connect with the underwater photographers, and they typically say things like, taken with this camera, shot in this location, and they would maybe have the species name, and half the time it was wrong. And so I'd reach out to them and I'd say, hey, I'd love to write about this species and position it more as like a superhero and talk about its, adaptive traits as like superpowers. And they were like, sure. Like, and so I started doing that and just really profiling it. And what I was surprised is people were like, this is the first time I've ever heard about this species, or I thought there was just one species of octopus. And so I was so fulfilled by the fact that I was almost writing love letters from these species to the world under this really cool lens. And I had no idea that it was going to be what it is today. I just was having so much fun with it because, at the time, I was working in New York in the fashion, space. And this was such a great escape at night to just, from like 12 at night to 3 o'clock in the morning, just writing was like really fun for me.
It's great therapy too.
Yeah.
It's also the ability to be like, I could pour myself into something
Mm-hmm.
that I'm the one who started. It's my baby. I could get it going and no one could take it from me.
And I was told, people that I hold a microphone up to the talents that I work with. Like that's my job is to not change what you're saying or do whatever, just hold a microphone up to what you're doing. And that's why when we kind of go back and you said you typically work with people you're really aligned with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because I know of the, I guess, power that I possess as how I build communities and fandoms. And I don't want to put that behind somebody who I don't 100% believe in. And so I choose to work with people who I'm just like, who do I need to hold a microphone to? Like, who would I be interested in holding a microphone to right now? And that's kind of how I make the decision of who I choose to work with now, is like, who needs a boost, who's doing really cool work that needs to be heard by more people. And it's just really fun for me. Yeah.
And it's kind of cool to see like now, like with the book and where the book's been on the global stage, there's not just one fan, there's millions of fans, and millions of people have been impacted around the world. It's funny on how obsessed people are. I mean, I've probably created, a mini fan club within my space of all the coaches that have octopus tattoos. And I'm like, wait a second. And they're like, yo, I got one. And then they all like lift up their legs and Nick pulls up a sleeve and Dom goes like this. And I'm like, wait, what's going on? Everyone's getting tattoos now?
Yeah. And that was
really crazy.
Yeah. In the beginning, when I was like mapping out strategies, and it was like, okay, if you answer this question, like if you had to reverse engineer the attention span of somebody who's self-identified as being interested in the octopus, who is currently serving those eyeballs? So when you think of tattoo artists that specialize in doing really unique like tattoo art, like Akari Barba, who is in California, who does these incredible. So it's like strategically collaborating with individuals who people seek to do octopus tattoos and showcasing their work and strategically collaborating that people to hit like all of those octopus fans to get them all into one place. It's like there were so many different campaigns that we launched in the very beginning that I was just like, okay, how do I serve underwater photographers? How do I serve people that, have an octopus tattoo and make them feel seen? How do I serve people that, love going to the aquariums? And then figuring out through that process, what does OctoNation stand for? What do we stand against? What are we comfortable talking with? And that's kind of like through OctoNation, I developed like this methodology called the 7 C's of building a fanatical online community. And it was through growing OctoNation myself and being a practitioner and like seeing how all of this kind of plays out to then develop this methodology that now I plug into anybody that I work with, because it's truly what it takes to like build not just a community that like vanity metrics, you have millions and millions of followers, but a community that shows up and where you create programming that's actually deserving of their attention, which is very different than you just being like, yeah, I've decided that I'm just going to talk about this today. It's like, no, you really have to be like, in this like ecosystem of media, it's like, how are you truly deserving of attention? What are you doing and what are you talking about? And really thinking what matters so that you don't waste your time. Um, because I think that's another edge that I have is losing my mom so early. She wanted to do so many different things with her life. And so when I see people that come to me and they say, like, because I used to speak on stage a lot, and they'd be like, I have this 5-year plan or this 2-year plan. I'm just like, tomorrow's not promised.
Yeah.
You know,
What are you doing now?
yeah, how can we take what you wanted to do in 5 years and do it in 90 days? Like, is there a world in which that could potentially exist? And have you thought about that? And they're like, no, I'm giving myself a lot more time. I'm like, what if you didn't? Like, what if we did this in 90 days? Or what if we really figured it out? Um, and that's what I'm really interested in is not I have so much time to figure this out. It's like, what would need to happen? What would need to be true? What campaign would need to happen that could help you hit escape velocity with these group of people? And so that's just kind of what I think about is like asking more questions, um, and seeing, is there a world in which this could happen sooner? Because it's been my experience with everything that I've done, like me wanting to move to New York and then immediately getting really strategic and then creating a plan and then literally being there in 2 weeks. Um,
You
like what?
definitely are someone who is resourceful,
Yeah.
and you find a way.
Mhm.
And you definitely are someone who's like, wait a second, I'm outcome driven.
Yeah.
And because I'm outcome driven, I will figure out a way and the process will evolve to get to the outcome that I want. But taking no for an answer is not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
You tend to do that. You
Yeah.
also tend to look at people's potential as probably the biggest thing that holds them back, because if they're not aspirational driving to something that's like up to their potential, who knows what your potential is, but you won't know if your goal is low.
Mhm.
You'll only know if your goal is higher than what you think is possible. And you tend to be attracted to people that have massive goals to make
Mhm.
good impact.
Yeah. And it just depends, like, because there are some people who have had massive impact in their lives and they're looking to go from 100 to 200. But there are some people who are starting off at 0 and they're like, they see people that are famous today or whatever, and they're like, oh my gosh, I wish I could get there. And in this current environment, you can get there very quickly.
So you think that's possible for people just getting started?
100%. It's what they really need to know, and like to get into the 7 C's, just that first one is clarity, and that's the one that people try to skip over all of the time, and it's the most important, and it has to be like deeply connected to, like I would say that there has to be a through line. So with me with OctoNation, that through line is me, be at 7 years old. There's this love and affinity that I have for this animal that when people go, are you worried about somebody creating another fan club or whatever? I'm like, good luck. I'm truly obsessed.
Yeah.
Like there's an obsession that I have where I'm just like, it would have to be another, ADHD autistic individual that literally reads research papers every single night and also has the social awareness and skills to write in a way that is, that can hit the amount of people that it hits, and I welcome that because, it's like, I want more people in this community, and it would only be helping out what I call the octopus economy. And so I'm always helping anybody who wants to write an octopus book. I'm like, let me help you. Like, let me help you position it, because I know the community and what they're really looking for.
I could say that you have, I mean, it's very obvious you built the world's largest octopus nation, but you've probably made the most impact to the humanitarian efforts, to the actual animal. And what you've also done is created an environment where people are more aware and creating more education around it, which gets more people excited at a younger age. My son loves them because they're stickers, and we have a pink one, that we have, and we have we have this one. It's like really cool to kind of see that we have these things now that I wasn't obsessed as a young kid. I'm not obsessed now. I like it. I love it. I think it's awesome. I think they're really cool. But there's a huge difference between people thinking something is cool versus being so crazy about something, and they can get clear on that outcome. So
I remember, just like to talk about that, is I remember I would teach through OctoNation because I thought, what a really quirky thing to like be able to teach somebody. If I can do it with this, you can do it with what you're doing. But what I found was even people listening now, they go, yeah, Warren, like I get it. you did it, but this is so like abstract or weird or whatever. And part of the 7 C's of building a fanatical community, that first C, clarity, is who is the community for and what is the community about. And the more abstract or vague those two things are, the more you're going to create potential infighting with the community that you're looking to build, right? And so I always would use OctoNation, but I found that it was a block for most people because it was so quirky or so, out there for them. They were like, how would this apply to me? And I found that not that many people have the ability to reframe something that somebody is doing for themselves to their business. But if you can kind of see the underlying game behind, OctoNation or behind, anything that I've done, it applies to everything. And so that's why I decided to kind of build out that methodology, was because I was just like, okay, I need to be able to explain this in so many different ways. And so it was like one of my projects where I started like doing some education and consulting and blog writing for Meta and with people that ran Facebook groups. I started consulting Facebook groups. Some of the people that ran the largest Facebook groups in the world, I helped them develop out their programming for their channels, their collaboration strategy, their how they would convert people ethically into a sale, because a lot of people thought conversion or making money in their community was a bad word. Like they had so much trauma around feeling like they were exploiting their community. And I was like, no, you need to create resources so that the community, can grow even more. And so, I had to create this methodology or this strategy for building fanatical communities that like created this community-driven institution. And now I think YouTube calls it fan-funded communities, where we're in this day and age where, it used to be like PBS funded by viewers like you, where if you can get people to kind of believe in what you're doing and your programming and what you put out into the world, there are so many people that want to invest $1, $3, $5, $10 every single month to help you actualize what you want to do or the conversations that you want to have. But I feel like a lot of people, they're just like, oh, that's weird, or I don't want to do that, or they have imposter syndrome around what they create. And I don't understand that, because I see what value they're providing the people who they were meant to transform or serve.
And once they know that, and they have like very crystal clear awareness around what they are doing, who are they serving, and what's the purpose behind that, what is that through line, and they have clarity, what comes after clarity?
Core values. So like you were saying with me, I typically only work with people I'm really aligned with. And
I say that through, because I know the people that you have worked with and the ones that you're still involved in, but I also know who you hang around with, and they normally tend to be people that, all right, I could jam with this person.
Yeah,
partly it's borrowed credibility because of the relationship with Warren, or like I have a level of trust that, okay, if they say he's a good guy, like he's got to be.
Yeah, it's I mean, like I said, that second C, core values, and they're in this order for a reason, because core values show up in every single comment you write on social media. They show up in every single piece of content you put out there in the world. They show up. I mean, you can manifest, not in the woo-woo sense, but like when you think of people writing reviews for your brand or your business, it all starts with you showcasing some value of your core value in your content on an ongoing basis. And so when I help people kind of map out what are their value sets, what do they stand for, and when they ask me what should I create, or should I do that, I'm like, okay, does it line up with your core values? Because at the end of the day, we want to build this fanatical community, and if we go against a value that we have, then it's going to cause infighting. Like, and if you're curious why people are upset, or if you're curious why your comments are starting to get negative, if you're curious, like your comment section is like is a direct representation of what values you're putting out there in the world. So when people are like surprised that they're getting hate comments, I'm just like, well, let's look into that. Let's play counterintelligence with that. If people aren't happy with something that you're putting out, what values are you exhibiting here? And I don't think people stop to think. I think they just kind of create from a very ego-driven state, and they never stop to think, what am I building here? And, so yeah. So with just giving an example with OctoNation, very early on, people wanted to know whether or not we were for or against aquariums. And because my origin story with OctoNation is I saw one for the first time because I was, in a place where I didn't have access. I was in the middle of 7 children. And, doing interview with an octopus and going to aquariums all over the world, interviewing Aquarius, I was like, they're on the front line of ocean conservation. They show up to work every single day to help educate and inspire people about our oceans, to help them understand what's at stake and have a front row seat to these animals. I was just like, accredited aquariums are worth being here. They're worth, being around. But there were a huge group of people that were just like naturalists, or just like, no, they're exploiting animals, they're doing this, they're doing that. And so you have a decision to make. Are you pro accredited aquariums, or are you, not?
Yeah.
And so you really have to kind of figure out what you stand for. And yeah, so it's just one of the many things that, as like you're building out, like being very intentional with what are your values, and not going against them. So,
and you're going to get some blowback either way. So like there's going to be a group of people that don't like that decision, and then there's going to be another group of people that wouldn't have liked the decision if you went the other way. So it's going to happen regardless. But you got to be true to who you are.
And to give you an example, with one of my current clients, Emily D. Baker, who's a pop culture legal commentator on YouTube, we built that community together. And in the very beginning, when we were talking about her comment section, or talking about her on live stream, there were all of these. We could make our chat the Thunderdome, where people could come in and they could say anything, or we could have a moderated chat, and be like, no, you can't come in here and you can't just say everything. Some things are off limits, like calling a defendant, speculating on their mental health, like or doing whatever. Like, it's just not okay here. And we wanted people in the chat to feel as if it were a place that they could express their opinion and not get called names. And so this is one of the many values that we have on that channel. We have so many moderators now that when she has 40,000 to 400,000 live concurrent viewers, people are like, why am I having such a good time here? Or why does this space make me feel empowered? And it's all very intentional and very strategic. We've definitely thought a lot about what environment we want to create in that live stream environment. And so, it's just how you do things when you're building that fanatical community.
And it also, it again goes back to that alignment, because immediately people are like, okay, we are aligned together on this core value. We're going to attack it from this point of view. So you have clarity, then you have core values. What's next?
Content is how are you deserving of attention? And I always say that all the time, because I'll look at some people's content. I'm like, how did you decide to post this? Or, what's your strategy here? Or, how is this deserving of people's attention on a daily basis? And I don't mean to say that from like a cocky way, but like, have you ever thought, is this deserving of attention? And what value is this adding? Is it purely entertainment? What are people getting out of it? Are people actually viewing this? Because there are some people that I'll watch that will make video after video and have low views and just continue doing the same thing. And I'm just like, are we not curious as to why none of your stuff has popped off yet? And it's figuring out that award-winning formula for you from a programming standpoint that's deserving of attention. And
is there a award-winning formula?
It really depends on the person and their community. I mean, to give an example with OctoNation, I remember in the very beginning, as I started getting viral posts and reaching more and more people, I let my ego come in, and I was like really curating programs that I wanted to see, that I was curious about, like pop surreal art for Octopus, and people were like, we don't get it. Like, we don't, show us octopuses doing really cool things and explain what's going on. That's what we want to see. Like, that's like the hero thing. And so
I do like the sticker packs.
Yeah.
So, I can put a public vote out there. I got a bunch of stickers. I still like that.
Yeah, there are people that are really mad that we did away with the sticker. But we I forget what I was talking about.
So you talk about content is it's the driver of attention.
Yeah, and so I can give you an example with Emily in the beginning, and it's very dependent on also the personality of the person. Emily is openly neurodivergent, ADHD, and has sensory issues with light, and there's a lot of things going on there. And I was just like, okay, what programming can we potentially create that honors that, creates sustainability within the stuff that she wants to create, and she has fun doing, and it's great for her workflow. And I remember the first time I was just like, hey, let's just go live on Instagram. And she was just like, okay. And then after she went live on Instagram, I was like, okay, let's just publish that to YouTube. She was like, but it's vertical. And I was like, it doesn't matter. Like it's great content. People, they want to hear it. And there was like this perfectionism around what she thought YouTube was and what she thought content was, and all of this kind of rules that people have for themselves. And sometimes that isn't as important as the content and the programming. And so I was like, people are really interested in what a former district attorney of Los Angeles has to say about popular culture events, or high profile trials, because there's so many people that have opinions, but it's like color commentary for the courtroom, essentially.
Yeah, and she popped off of like Kanye West stuff and other
Yeah,
things that were relevant.
and so that formula, really worked for her, but also she is a talent. Like, she is a phenom. She lights up when she's talking about things. She processes in real time better than anybody that ever like seen before as it relates to the courtroom. She sees all the nuances. She understands all the laws. She's the perfect person to be doing what she's doing right now, and just identifying that and creating validation points to where this is going to work out. Like, there's, and sometimes you have to do that for people who are just starting out, because they go, okay, how will I know when I've reached escape velocity and I can do this full time? And so it's figuring out what needs to happen in what order for this person to understand, no, this is a full-time thing for you now. And so, yeah, so creating that content for somebody and having them be.
How much volume is there? Like, you have, obviously the clarity of the message, you have the core values of which everything interacts with, not
Mhm.
just the content that you're creating, which is the third C, but also like the people
Yeah.
are attached to that core values. And then you create more content that aligns with that,
Mhm.
and you start to build the attraction.
That's
How
what I
much
said.
content's needed?
Like, everything drives back to, so you have content, and every single piece of content has to map into your core values, which again holds a megaphone to the clarity that you're bringing. So if you're everyone's favorite legal commentator, which that's going to map to everything, and then you have your core values and you create your content, it's like everything has to map through that, like becoming that or being that. And so I feel like that clarity in the beginning, if you don't have it, then you're creating content, but it's not really mapping to anything, and you're not building this fanatical community as a result of you not even having thought of these things. And so even after content, when you get into collaboration, and that's who currently owns the eyeballs of the people who, like, going back to OctoNation, who currently owns the people who are servicing that community. So like aquariums all over the world that have an octopus exhibit, they own their local attention, and they own travel attention of people who are coming to see the octopus or are interested in there. And so I remember a long time ago, I think Instagram still has it, but if you go on Instagram and you go to, say, Monterey Bay Aquarium, and you go to places on Instagram, you can search anybody that's ever uploaded a photo at Monterey Bay Aquarium. And so for us, we were looking at people that went to Monterey Bay Aquarium and engaged with a photo of an octopus, or took a photo of an octopus. Because what that signals to me is that they cared enough about this animal to post it on their social media, to showcase to the world that, hey, this is an animal that I care enough about to show it to all my friends. Like, I'm really wowed by it. And so it's like, they need to be an OctoNation, right? And so because I had that clarity with what I was doing, I could map to, how do I find these people? Where are they at?
And the collaboration becomes a compounding effect instead of one-to-one. It
Yeah.
allows you to basically tap into environments that don't know you exist, but you already know that they're aligned with everything that you're doing, which is super powerful.
Yeah, if they cater to a community that has the eyeballs of the people who you're trying to get in front of. But what you have to go back to is core values. So it's really important that if you're working with, like, say, an aquarium, or you're working with whoever you feel like that they are working with the people that don't go against the values of your organization, because it'll destabilize your community. But sometimes people look at big brands and they're like, I would kill to work with this brand, but they don't go into who have they worked with before, and what campaigns have they done? What do those campaigns stand for? What do they stand against? Does that make sense for your business? Because I've turned down a lot of big collaboration opportunities early on for OctoNation that on paper didn't make any sense because they were such big organizations. But for me, I was just like, I don't really like the content that they're putting out, or I don't really like the values that they have here. And so it's not going to work for me. And I know in the long run, it's going to be better for my community because I'm not working with them. So I do that with everybody that I work with. It doesn't matter what the opportunity is. If they've chosen to align themselves with an individual that I'm just like, this isn't good, like they're obviously interested in a different demographic, or sometimes maybe the employees at that company are fanboys or fangirls for a specific influencer, and the company isn't aware that they're driving the community as a result of working with all these influencers. It's like such an important part of community building to be in control of that collaboration strategy. And
alignment and the disassociation is just as important.
100%.
So it's like, I align with this group and I want the association and partnership here. This is my collaborational effort. But the who you decide not to do business with is just as important as it is to the people that you do business
100%.
with.
Yeah.
After collaborations, what's the next thing?
So it's connection. So connection is, how are you making your community members feel seen? And what campaigns do you have that allow your community or your followers to feel as if one day I could be there, or one day there's an opportunity for me to be spotlit. So within OctoNation, we have a photographer spotlight, we have artist spotlight, we will feature underwater photographers from all over the world. There's so many different connection campaigns that allow our members to feel like, okay, if I participate in the octopus economy, or I create something worthwhile, I have the opportunity to be featured in a global showcase. And so a lot of...
It's actually an honor, but it's also an amazing opportunity. I mean, you look at like even a photographer. I think about photographers because I follow a lot of the work that you post. And I also think about, even though I don't have any, the tattoo artists, because they're just so, like, it becomes like a gateway drug into their work too.
Yeah.
And I want to see more of it.
And a lot of the photographers that we've worked with have now licensed footage with Netflix. They've licensed footage with documentaries. Like, it's been really cool to put people who like nobody knows about on the map as a result of, I know that every single time I post something, there are all these producers that are working on documentaries all over the world that essentially are seeing the content, and they're reaching out and they're licensing that content. And so what it does is it creates, again, an economy for wildlife photography, because when people see that a video goes viral on my account, they're just like, like, I need to reach out to that person and license that content. And so again, it's just great for the economy. So that connection and that building those campaigns out, it's not just about, the brand. It's also about the individuals that make up the brand and putting them on in a place where they can be seen.
Absolutely.
Right. So
you're also looking at the fact that within a great community, there's a massive amount of enhanced opportunities. So if you're a part of this, the opportunities are better for the people, and it's adding more value. So it's very like a flywheel inside of the community that you're building.
Yeah. And I remember in the beginning when I first started OctoNation, I kind of wanted to go from 0 to 100, and immediately started reaching out to also a lot of academics. And they were very skeptical of and kind of unsure of OctoNation because they're like, well, who's running it, and what is their background, and do they have a background in marine biology? Like, how can I know that what they're writing is real? And instead of me being like, I'll show you, essentially, I, you know, found a scientific advisor, and made sure that all of our posts were seen by her, and that were edited, and really started taking it seriously, because I was like, okay, I understand there is a roadblock here for academics to know, like, is this information accurate? And so as I was building OctoNation up from the blogging side, I made sure that I was working with, the best of the best, but also making sure that the information was accessible to our broad audience. Because there were a lot of people that wanted to come in and share their research, and I'm like, no one's going to understand anything. So I kind of worked with them to position their work in a way that people could appreciate it, which again helped everybody, and it helped people become more interested and fascinated with, different things about the octopus.
Well, I think it's interesting too, in the sense that how serious you take that goes a long way. I wanted to buy something that had an octopus on it, that was a very artistic piece, and I really liked it, and I wanted it to be it was something I was going to get, and I sent it to you before I bought it. And you're like, I love it. However, and you said, this accuracy, this issue, that's not a good representation. I'm like, it bummed me out, because I'm like, I really want this thing. But at the other side of it, I felt a sense of pride to know that if I bought it, I could basically say, and I want to know I want to show you, like, where your own errors are. But you want to go back to that brand and tell them, like, hey, well, why would you be putting a representation of something inaccurately? It almost shows that you don't care enough about it.
Yeah.
You're not putting the spotlight on this on this animal. You're putting the spotlight on your bag, or you're putting the spotlight on your art piece. And I think that the best way to represent that would be in the research and the authenticity of the representation of the work. And you do that quite well.
Yeah. And I'm okay with art and how different people interpret it. It's just my little tism thing with seeing, like,
when you said little tism, what did you mean?
seeing, like, two siphons on, either side. Octopuses just have one siphon, or if they have, like, circular pupils. I'm like, I was talking to toy manufacturing companies early on, and I asked them, I was like, why do your eyes, why do they have circular pupils? And they were like, because they're the same eyes we can use for other animals, and it's cheaper. And then also, parents think that the horizontal bars kind of make the toys look demonic. And I'm just like, okay, well, like, it's one of their biggest superpowers. They've evolved over hundreds of millions of years to have no blind spot. They have nearly 360 degrees of vision. You think that'd be a cool, like, lesson to teach people, and something that you would want to highlight maybe as why your toy is unique. And they're like, yeah, they didn't know these things, and so just educating them on how this is actually a really cool part of their anatomy, the fact that they have this. And maybe those parents just need to be educated. And once they figure out that, like, imagine two panoramic cameras on the sides of your head, octopuses can see literally in every direction, because they're so highly preyed upon that they needed to evolve to essentially have such a wide field of vision that nothing could sneak up on them. And I just think that's super cool. And so getting that across, I just started seeing more plushies and more things come onto the market where people didn't make that mistake. And I think it's because at scale, we just constantly, like,
Educating the market
to where people started saying in comment sections, love this, but the eyes are wrong. Like, or
nice.
You know what I mean? Like, you would see that, or like OctoNation people would, tag me and being like, OctoNation would love this if, the eyes were accurate, or something like that.
There's nothing better than a community that is so strong that defends your idea for you, because that's what's really powerful.
Yeah.
After you go into, those collaborations and partnerships, as you kind of build those things out, where do you go next?
Yeah. So I said your collaboration, then connection, and then you get into conversion. And the reason why conversion is almost last is because conversion is where you talk about money, and how do you ethically drive somebody to a sale, and what are you raising money for? What resources are you creating? So, like, the stuffed animal you're holding, it's sold by a lot of other people, but if you buy it through OctoNation, you know that the proceeds from that are going towards building information and covering the latest research as it relates to the blue-ringed octopus. We just wrote a blog a couple months ago about the mating strategy of the blue-lined octopus. So apparently they'll get on the back of the mantle of the female, pierce her aorta, inject venom to paralyze her, and then mate with her so that she doesn't eat him. And they were covering this phenomenon, and so we covered it on our blog. But the sale of our merch allowed us to hire editors, allowed us to hire, to license photography, allowed us to do all these things. And so I feel like that's when you're building out a strategy of where does this money go to? Do you feel good about it? What are you creating to pour back into the economy that you're creating? There are a lot of brands that just create things, and they're not thinking about the economy. Like, say you're an athleisure brand, but you're not sponsoring, say you're an athleisure brand who caters to primarily women, but you're not creating campaigns around women's empowerment, or you're not sponsoring female podcasters, or you're not pouring back into the fitness female podcasters. You're not pouring back into the economy that drives the awareness from your brand. I feel like from a conversion standpoint, you're missing the mark on ethically converting and building economy in your world. And so it's just a way to think about, where all the money is going in your community and kind of what you're creating. And, that's what I do with my current clients, that, yes, they generate a lot of money with what they do, but we're also pouring back into the
bigger mission.
Yeah, the bigger mission.
For sure.
And
I think it's really cool too, is just the stories behind it. I don't think that the story that you just talked about, the mating side of things is number one, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Right? Just the fact there's a cool factor of what you do. Number two, I am more invested now because I know more about something, and now I have a cool story that can be used in multiple environments, to the point where I want to hear it again, and I want to hear it again. And the migration path of the blue-ringed octopus, which is really cool, is why it's one of our mascots as a company, is because it's the migration path from Australia to a very small island in the Philippines called Apo Island. And the direct migration path is where all of the tourists go and scuba divers go to this resort to literally see this little migration path, because it ends up right on the end of this small little island right here. And our office overlooks this island. So the reason why we have this is a lot of different reasons of how cool it is. The size of it, the small business, big impact, how it drives to the community. That's kind of our theme. So there's a storyline behind it. I wouldn't have been able to do that if it weren't for education.
Yeah.
I couldn't have just been well, I really like the idea of Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man. So we're going to have this pink one, and then we're going to have this yellow one, and we're going to have this cool experience. But which one's male? Which one's female? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And then I wouldn't have been able to tell the story about it. And people are oh, I love this. I have, a bunch of pens. We and they're one of the most stolen things at our damn booth is the octopus pens, and it drives me nuts because you can't get them. You can't get enough of them, and they're so cool. But
and we've done a lot of consulting with companies who because again, if they make their company mascot a animal, it's okay, that's really cool, but what are you doing to help that animal, or do you have a commitment, or are you doing something? And we saw that with Bacardi and bats, them really investing into organizations that conserve bats and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's just really understanding that's should be something that you take into consideration. And while in this world, I've talked to a lot of brands that are so performance marketing based, where they're just okay, well, how does that make us money? And I'm very much brand awareness and community driven institution, and time again when I work in this model, it creates so much freedom, because you have your community so deeply invested that you could be platform agnostic. You are not beholden to any really platform whatsoever, because you built such a fandom that you can call the shots. You don't need to have any sponsors if you don't want to. you can really choose who you want to work with, how you want to work with them, what you want to create. And you can do that by building a fanatical community. And then the lastly, just to kind of end it, that consistency. How do you do all of that, without losing your mind? You know what I mean?
Sounds
Because
like you've already done that.
because I've just done it so many different times, and it really is like going back to that first you with clarity and just making sure that that you're just in true alignment with what you're doing and understand what a profound impact of what you're doing is, that you create feedback loops within your community that lets you know that you're on the right track, and like just don't lose sight of that, and so oftentimes that means hiring a team. That's kind of where, like, once you've established all of those C's, it's like making sure that your ethos is expanding beyond just you. And I've worked with executive leadership coaches and mentors, and I remember even in the beginning, I was like, if I could just create the largest Octopus fan club, that would be cool. And then one of my mentors was like, go look at all of the 990s of the nonprofits that are in wildlife, and go look at how much they're making. Go look at the economies that they're building, and then let's rework your vision for OctoNation. And when I went to go look and saw just how much they were doing, I was just like, okay, so our mission, our vision changed to become a our mission is to inspire wonder of the ocean by educating the world about octopuses, and our vision is to be a global leader in wildlife education, research, and conservation, which means against all the animals is to create a system, a methodology that understands popular culture, that interacts with popular culture, that creates resources that are wearable education, that gets people to stop and talk, about this animal. Creates resources like on Instagram and like stories. If you search OctoNation, you can play with all of like these GIFs.
Yeah.
You can add them to your stories. And so it's creating a world in which people can showcase their affinity for this animal more. And it doesn't necessarily always have to have your brand name on it.
Yeah.
You're creating for the ecosystem, for the, whatever. So,
and it goes a long way too, because it ends up in the right hands. I mean,
yeah,
you got to also have probably a lot of pride when you start to see your stuff in the wild.
yeah. I mean, we've had.
I got Huberman. I see pictures with him all the time. I wear it on my environment. Like that's my
This is
environment.
This is
Rogan's wearing it on his show. Like you see all of these people, and I'm like, yo, that's Warren. That's my guy. And it's fun pride that I have. How do you feel about it?
And what's wild is that none of these people know me.
No way.
Yeah, none of these people. I mean, Huberman knows me because I've reached out to him, but had I not, he wouldn't know me. We've like never met in person, but it's through our shared affinity of this animal that it doesn't. I don't necessarily care about his celebrity, or he doesn't care about me so much as a person. It's like this shared affinity towards this animal and our interest in it that brings us together. And like, I mean, there's so many different celebrities that follow OctoNation, like Michael B. Jordan.
People are fascinated by it, and I find it to be funny in the sense that them not knowing you, because once they do get to know you, I think that obsession will actually become more connected through actual education.
Yeah,
because. I mean, shit, just if you told that story that you tell right now about, paralyzing a female to make them so that they don't get eaten. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And like the migration path that we talk about, like of our mascot to our office, and the idea that, we do a SAIL training, which is called System for Advancing Internal Leaders. It was developed by one of my mentors, Joe Craver, when he was at a very large company. He worked at in the Naval Academy guy, and he built our mentorship program internally to where it's like it became a system for advancing internal leaders called SAIL, and we do our SAIL events at a area called Atmosphere Resorts, and Atmosphere has a ton of support to the preservation of the wildlife, and like scuba diving and exploitation of the sea, but doing it while they don't like wreck it. There's a lot of people that will want to monetize their service of going out there, and then there's people that are like, wait a second, are we going to actually be very cautious of the path that we're going, or are we going to just like destroy this area because we're going to use it so much. And you want to be aligned with people that are like that are not going to just be focused on like, all right, how many people can we fit in this boat and make as much money as possible, versus the people that are actually like they aligned with why they're doing and with you as well, and become ethical. And I think that's how we could support them as well, is just being able to put our events in those places. And I think that's kind of things that you do all the time.
Yeah, I've done a lot of like corporate gigs where, say, a company wants to change their logo to an octopus, and I kind of come in as the hype man to explain to the teams, why the octopus is so cool. And what we found is that it helps retain employees.
You're hired. I didn't know this.
Yeah,
Oh,
it helps retain employees because they love that they work for a company that has a mascot that's so cool. And we've rolled out like custom figures or like custom octopuses for companies where they wear it. They have stickers. They have and it keeps them engaged. And so yeah, it's.
Have you seen the shoes that Jetmore made? Like one of our painters and graphic designers. I gotta send you a picture.
Yeah.
Like he made custom shoes for me with the octopus on it, and it's our logo, but it's also got the background of our of the city for our office, and then it has like a bunch of different like little things that are in there. That's kind of cool. But yeah, we're all in. It's really neat. So
like I said, it's for us, it's like helped like again explain to like teams how cool the octopus is, but it does retain employees, I found, because again they're just like, man, this is such a cool company to work for. I like that their logo is an octopus, and it's just something to talk about.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I wear the actually they have you have a pin. I wear it when I'm at work. Like that's my work pin.
Yeah.
Whenever we go to like formal events where I'm meeting partners in like the city, or even lawyers that we're meeting with, or developers or landlords, like I wear the pin, and then it's always like, well, what's that about? I'm like, oh, and it's a conversation piece. But the actual the blue ring octopus pin is probably like the coolest one.
Yeah. What's cool with OctoNation is because of the clients that I work with OctoNation, I kind of get to be the PR agent for individuals like artists or underwater photographers. Like I can kind of work for them for free from the standpoint of building the octopus economy up. And it's just something that is really fun for me from the standpoint of like helping them figure out how to make a big splash in the octopus world as a result of like the millions of comments we've gotten since starting it. I think we celebrated our 10-year in September of this year.
Wow,
10 years.
That's unbelievable.
Of being around, and there's just so much information that I've learned just about how people respond to things in popular culture, what's going to work, what's not going to work, what headlines have come out about the octopus that have like struck a chord with a lot of people. And so now it's like, you can engineer that now to where you can make a splash if you write a research paper, but it's worded incorrectly or worded in a way that people aren't going to understand it. It's like sometimes I'll work with scientists that are publishing new work to help them come up with a title that is going to hit, mainstream media. Nice. So it's really fun for me to.
What are in your opinion, you've seen so much, right? I think I may have just figured out one of my coolest stories, which is the one you just shared. But what are some of your coolest features of this animal that you're obsessed with?
Since the beginning, it's been the eyes. Like I'm a very big eyes person. From the standpoint of like that no blind spot, I just think it's cool. What evolution did with that was like, if you think of each octopus, they're perfectly adapted for their environment. And so you have like an Antarctic species that is perfectly adapted for like sub-zero temperatures. And then you have the hot water volcano octopus that lives next to like 200-degree hydrothermal vents where like seawater meets magma.
That's cool.
And so I think just looking at the species and looking how it has survived mass extinctive events on this world, I think it's fun to kind of take a mental vacation and, get rid of your ego and just look at life on this planet. Humans represent a blip on the radar of life. And oftentimes we think we're the ones that are like really running the show. And it's just very humbling to know at any point in time, Mother Nature could sneeze and we would not be here. Like we would be gone. And I think people don't stop to consider not to get all like crazy on people, but just like the lack of control we actually have, and the amount of gratitude you should have. And I think when you look at an animal like the octopus, you can really start to understand like they've really figured life out on this planet. And they're something that we should look at and really, I don't know, just kind of admire and be
Well, the
inspired.
cool thing is there's so much of the ocean that has not been actually researched. If you look at the percentage of how much of the actual depths of the waters that they've been able to actually, see that's there and how much is still left to be explored,
Yeah.
I guarantee you that there's so many different species and of adaptability that you'll see that we won't even know
Like
until we explore.
Schmidt Ocean Institute, they're a great account to follow. But they're the ones that taught me that there are certain parts of the deep sea, why they look kind of like barren and that there's not that much life around. They're as diverse from like organism standpoint as like the Great Barrier Reef. So like sometimes where like there's been a whale fall, it can create an economy or an ecosystem for, close to 10 years. And so there's just so much things about the ocean that completely blow my mind. And I think I remember hearing the story about the octopus that they discovered that broods over her eggs for nearly, is it 4 years or 3 years? I think it's 4 years. And they never witnessed her eat the whole entire time.
Wow.
So it's just remarkable. The more kind of like you learn about them, the more you're just like, wait a minute,
It's
like,
fascinating.
yeah. And so it's been one of those things that I haven't been able to shake my whole entire life. Typically, if you look at my life from a career standpoint, I like hit peak dopamine and then I get over it. Like I've been a competitive food eater. Like I was in real estate and sold $1 million homes. I, was in the fashion industry and hit the top there. And then like there's all these different things that I've hit the peak and then lost interest and moved on to something else, which is totally ADHD. But with
This one, not so much.
the octopus, yeah, it's just they're endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, and like the fact that you have the books.
Yeah.
Fully, let me grab this one. They're beautiful. First off, like I love them, but translated in multiple different languages, different versions in Japanese and in English, pictures, and I have the hardback of them, and you have such, like, you did it right.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something to be said about that when it becomes a passion project to where or it's like passion or it's profit. And there's got to be that overlap between what is the purpose behind this work. And I think that you've showcased that really well. There's a saying that you have that I want to like close the loop on this talk with. And I do find you to be a very, like, you're like I'm talking to Shrek and there's layers to you, it's like an onion, right? And there are layers to Warren, and you have a lot of simplicity in your life, but a lot of complexity as well. And you get to the point and stuff. You don't like people making excuses for them not achieving their goals. You figure out the how to do things, and you're just like, well, let's just make it happen. Well, why are we so worried about all the constraints when in reality the first constraint is that you don't believe that you could do it? And you have this concept called hypothetical hell. In your mind, where do people go?
I don't know. They typically, people will make things all about them, and I understand why they do it. I was briefly telling you about like my high ACE score. ACE score is adverse childhood experiences, and I'm off the charts with that. And and I don't brag about this, but my ability to disassociate as a result of my childhood trauma, I think, gives me a unique perspective on when I'm looking at someone. I see their humanity and I see their imposter syndrome and I see the stories that they're telling themselves. Like I can see all of it, and I'm like listening to them, but I'm also listening like at this underlying script that they tell themselves. And I mentioned to you, thoughts are things, thoughts become things, and the stories we tell ourselves truly manifest into the reason why we do something or we don't do something. And so hypothetical hell is just this idea that people are like, well, what if this happens? What if this? And if I do this, what if this? And then they kind of spin out and then they don't do something, or they allow. One of my mentors a long time ago said, I'd rather ignorance on fire than knowledge on ice, and your knowledge on ice, because at the time I was very conceptual and I did a lot of reflective thinking and I couldn't move anything that I wanted to do forward. And it was just as a result of me reveling in the research and not doing it. So for me, it would be like researching a lot about octopuses, but not ever pushing out anything in
publishing.
the world, not publishing.
And I don't know that version. I only know the version that gets shit done.
Yeah. And so
Warren says he's going to do something. You're like, all right, guys, get the calendar out. It's happening in this timeline.
But for me, like there's more of a payoff, and there's honestly more dopamine for me to keep that work to myself. And I don't necessarily need to share it. And so once I discovered that, like, like I tried to find the joy of in the comment section people saying this is the first time I've heard it explained this way. Now I finally understand this. I started looking at that and I started loving the fact that I was explaining things in a way that finally made people understand like what's at stake in the ocean, or finally made people understand. There was that story of this young girl. The father reached out to me and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I was at a fast food restaurant with my daughter, and when she went to throw something away, she said, where do I throw it away so that I don't hurt the octopus?"
Wow.
And he was just like, "I just want to let you know, I've never talked to her about conservation. I've never talked to her about, anything. And you're making a difference. And you're not making a difference in a way that, if you think of old commercials where dogs were in cages and Sarah McLachlan was singing it in the arms of an angel. I feel like media back in the day used to be very like, hey, we only have 30 seconds. Let's scare the shit out of everybody. Whereas now it is like through wonder, I'm inspiring our generation of kids and adults through not showing them, octopuses at sushi restaurants and like all of these fear mongering. I'm just inspiring wonder by talking about how cool things are and helping people understand how cool they are. And that's enough to make people be like, okay, well, what role, now that I know that, what role do I want to play in conservation? Or what role from an empowerment standpoint do I want to get activated in a cause or in whatever? And I feel like that's such a powerful position, other than them being angry and upset about doing something and being like, I'm so pissed off. I mean, of course there's a time and there's a place to be pissed off about, things in the world, but I feel like maybe
you get a lot further with honey vinegar sometimes.
Yeah. And so for like, to go back to the hypothetical hell, just when I have conversations with people, I can kind of see that underlying game that they're playing, and see how it's keeping them from moving forward. And I find that if I call it out and kind of disrupt, like I always say, like you've always had these scripts, and if I can kind of like, if you're riding a bike, I can almost like put a stick and you off the bike. So immediately when things come out of people's mouths who like I'm working with that don't serve the best version of them, I'm like, okay, can we go back here? Like if you genuinely think this, then we can't move forward. Or if you think this about this, then that's not going to get us here.
People need to put, if they're going to put a lot of weight in the negative thing that could happen, then you need to put the same amount of weight in the positive thing that could happen.
Yeah. I mean, we were with somebody last night who just said, I hate social media, and started coming up with all these different ways in which they just never liked it, and things like that. I'm like, okay, so that will be true for you. Like if you can't find your love for it or what you're interested in, like for me, my love was the reward of explaining something in such a way that made somebody comment, wow, like this is the first time I finally get this. If you can't find your version of that for you, then of course you're going to hate social media.
Exactly.
So it's like you have to figure out the game for you that creates sustainability with what you're doing. And if you don't do that and you just say these blanket statements, I just I won't allow people to be in my presence and say things like that without just being like, hey, like I know that works in other environments when you're with other people. They'll hear that and be like, yeah. I'm just like, no, not for me. So
and that's good on you, and I think that's that's why you hold a certain presence in the energy of people that you're around.
Even if I'm in a room with like a bunch of people talking, if I've decided to be in that room, then I'm probably going to be the person that makes a scene, and calls something out or calls a way of thinking out. Whereas other people will just kind of sit there and nod their heads. I'm just like, nah, I'm here for a reason.
Yeah,
So
people's agreeableness sometimes
yeah.
is too high.
Hmm.
I got 3 questions for you, and I think that everyone has something in them
Hmm.
that God put in their body that if it was given to somebody else,
Hmm.
that other person, whatever their circumstances are, could be a billionaire.
Hmm.
For me, it's pretty obvious from a lot of people. They go, "Oh my God, like you have such great confidence." And I always tell people that confidence comes from courage first,
Mm.
because confidence is reflective. It's a lagging indicator. So you turn around and you go, "Look at all the stuff that I've done." It's evidence,
Hmm.
but you have to have the courage to act. And I know that if someone had my confidence, if they had all the skills and did something, they would just do it. They could probably be a billionaire. Um, but in order to figure that out, I think that everyone has these superpowers, and we try to build these, these these superhumans.
Hmm.
What is it that you stand for?
I think from like a personal standpoint, I'm always typically one that will say, why are we doing it this way? Or, you know, um, I'm very curious as to, instead of just doing something, I really want to know, like I really want to map it out. I think that's why sometimes I make things longer than they should be. Or some people are like, hey, it's not that deep. Like I'm constantly told by people it's not that deep. But for the people that I work with at the level that I work with, it's very deep, and it,
Maybe not for you.
yeah, and it's very intentional, and I want to create intentional, nuanced communities, and I want to solve big problems. And so to solve big problems, you have to be strategic, you have to be intentional. Like, with Shalene, the disparity between men's and women's healthcare right now is too wild to ignore. The fact that they just removed the black box warning off of estrogen when men for decades could get testosterone, prescribed for them on any corner. You could go to a clinic and get testosterone prescribed for you. And that just hasn't been the reality for women. And so, when I started working with Shalene, um, it was this idea that this is a huge problem and you are a facilitator and a conduit to solve this. That's very exciting for me because you're in on wanting to do this. You understand this world, and you're perfectly positioned to be an ambassador for this cause.
And you be able to help them become
Yeah, and it's
the
like, again,
microphone.
holding the microphone to somebody who I feel like you really have a shot to make a huge dent and have your legacy be one of the people that truly made people understand that, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy for women is just as important, as it is for men.
Absolutely. Now
And yeah.
with that, you have something that you stand for. What do you stand against?
Um, that's a great question. Hmm. I mean, the first word that comes to mind is people who are naive, or lack self-awareness around just how important what they do is, um, and how you're on this planet literally to transform the lives of the people that you were meant to transform. Um, and that just because somebody else might be doing something doesn't mean that they're going to be able to transform the lives of the people that you are meant to transform. So I feel like there's this paranoia, or there's this naiveness that people have around just how important their voice is and their experience. And we live in this day and age where if you went on TikTok or you went on whatever, just as a result of what you look like, and your voice and your background and whatever, that is so profound, and so unique to you, that I feel like people go, well, who am I? And there's this imposter syndrome. So I think just against this idea that people aren't, unique and powerful in their own right, and just as important as as anybody else on social media. And that's not to say that like, everybody can sing, like that's not what I believe, but it's like, once you identify that, then, what are you going to do with it?
And with that, there is, what do you stand for? What do you stand against? But every superhero has a flaw. What's Warren's flaw?
Probably lack patience. There's my, partner, husband, Roberto. He could listen to somebody, and go on emotional journeys with them and really like coddle them. I'm not that person.
No, not at all.
I'm not that person. I will immediately call out, beliefs that don't serve you. I, will kind of come across as intense, especially if I'm working with you in a professional capacity. It's kind of like gloves off. Hey, you hired me for a reason.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's this patience that I have where I think it just goes back to losing my mom and maybe the trauma around that, where like tomorrow is not promised. Like, can we please like move past your insecurities or your imposter syndrome or your, inability to like, I don't know. It's like, can we just tie a bow on all that and just understand that you are like
in the now.
Yeah, you're in the now, and like
we have the thing in sports where it's like, hey, be where your feet are. You can't worry about the last play because that last play, if your head's over there, your feet can't be. So if your head's over there, your feet aren't going to be here. Be where your feet are because this is what's in front of you. That's the only way you make an impact. And I think you're making a huge impact.
And you can see the victim mentality too with just people in general, where again, because of my high ACE score and childhood trauma, I've had to work through a lot. And so when I see somebody where I'm just like, like, you don't need a business coach, you need like a therapist, or you need or you don't need to invest in a program. No program's going to work for you. And so I'm a huge advocate in psychiatric work, and finding tools that work for you. And if you've never considered that or had a conversation with a third-party objective that has your best interest at hand, or a coach, or you're not getting the results with the current person that you're talking to fast enough, then date around. Like, find somebody to work with. And so
most people stay in a dark place because it becomes comfortable. And I think the key that you talk about, and I'd like to wrap it up with this, is your frustration with your patience is the fact that you don't want other people to be patient with their potential because it's not guaranteed. And I think there's a lot of power in calling out their current performance based upon where they're trying to go. Because when their actions are not aligned to their ambitions, they're missing the opportunities for a future that they could have today.
100%.
So thank you, sir. Appreciate you so much.
Absolutely.
Catch up some more.
For sure.
You're the man.